Hey everybody, how are things going? Hope you're well. Hey, just wanted to share with you a couple of things today really quick on, again, as we're wrapping things up here on this first draft of your paper, preparing it for your final draft, which is due here pretty soon. What I want to talk to you today about is actually literally wrapping up your paper with the conclusion. So we've been kind of putting a lot together. We've kind of worked on your introduction, right? We did your narration a little bit earlier this semester. We've been obviously done a lot of research work. We've done a whole bunch of stuff, but we haven't really talked about um, ending your paper. Some people talk about that the ending or the conclusion of your paper is the most important part of your paper. And so I want to just kind of share with you a few things about that today. So the ending of your paper, what do you do about ending your paper, the conclusion? Well, you can see here I'm in a section of our text that we've kind of gone over a little bit before. This is section 30, chapter 30. That's really the section that talks about the organizing of your paper, the structure of your essay, the beginning, the middle, and the end, or as we say, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And in this section, there's a lot to it. This is always I always refer people to this section to just kind of, get a basic overview again of the beginning or the introduction. This kind of talks about conclusion or introduction stuff. This goes into thesis stuff that we've worked a little bit before on, the body, all that kind of stuff. And then especially the end, paragraph stuff. But the ending is what I want to talk about today. So why the ending? What is so important about the ending? Well, a lot of people consider the introduction or the beginning the most important part of the paper because, well, it introduces people to the paper. It has a lot of background information, historical information, sort of introduces us to what the paper is going to say. It has a thesis, right? Introduces us to the main idea, right? Just kind of lets people know what's coming, right? Sort of tells everybody what's ahead. Well, the ending or the conclusion sort of the same thing, but also it sort of wraps everything up, right? And in this section, it kind of talks about different ways to do that. But in short, your conclusion is just super important because, right, keep in mind it's the last thing that people are going to see when they read your paper. So imagine you're sitting here, you're kind of holding somebody's paper. It's got off to a great start. You're hearing all kinds of just really, really interesting information about, why a person thinks social media is a problem or uh, you know, uh, Alzheimer's is an issue that needs to be addressed or prison reform needs to be, dealt with or something. And you're reading this and you're just getting all kinds of great information and you're coming to the end of it. And at the end, you don't want to just be left hanging there, right? You don't want to be finished reading 5 pages and think, okay, well, now what? Now what? Well, what should we do about social media? Or what should we do about prison reform? What happened to so and so's mom? Did she like did she survive cancer? Did she, what happened? Maybe we should come up with a cure for cancer. Maybe we should come up, whatever, right? I mean, you get the idea. The ending should be a summing up of everything. By the time you finish reading that essay, you should have that feeling of like, wow, this is really interesting. This is really interesting. I totally understand that. I see where this person's coming from. See where this person's coming from. Just a kind of a nice summing up of everything. Like everything else, it's kind of an art, right? I mean, it takes a lot of practice, but there's several ways that you could approach it. This section kind of talks about it, so you might definitely want to go through and get some ideas here. But the conclusion is just really, really important. You don't want to not have it. You don't want to leave your readers hanging. I want to show you kind of a quick example of sort of what I'm talking about here. Uh, so we stop the share here. Let me bring up another one. So this is an example. Oh, I should probably share this so you can all see what I'm talking about here. Where did you guys go? Let's see. So if I show you, this is sort of um, an example of, geez, I gotta figure it out. One of these days I'm gonna figure out how to do this. Maybe you can see this. This is just a very, very basic example of what an introduction and a conclusion might look like for maybe if an issue was something about like say cell phones and cell phone usages and the problems or the issues on say like at elementary schools. And I what I just included here was an introduction and a conclusion. And why did I include the introduction and inclusion? Well, they always have to match, right? They have to, there's sort of a connection there, right? So if I'm introducing something on, say, I don't know, why cell phones must be banned, well, I obviously want to wrap up my story on, why cell phones must be banned. It's kind of like the closing argument of a trial, right? If I'm introducing something, I want to end that same topic. So anyway, here's sort of an example of maybe why here, this might be a sort of a sample paper of somebody coming up with an issue on, the dangers or the problems with cell phones at an elementary school. So you can kind of see I'm introducing this topic of cell phones, right? They're dangerous. They've been a problem, especially at elementary schools. They're just horrible things. Should parents play a role in them? Should government play a role with them? There's a connection maybe between cell phones and social media. By the way, you can see here, I've got a nice thesis that's clear and to the point, right? It's not, a whole paragraph long. It's not three or four sentences. It's just one clear sentence, straight to the point. Cell phones have a devastating effect on elementary school students. They must be banned in all schools. Of course, not everyone would agree with that, but that's okay, right? This is just my issue that might have an effect on my family, me personally, my kids, whatever. So this is my paper. So and then of course the body of the middle of the paper is going to have all kinds of research on this. Later on, I might have some graphs and charts or pictures or whatever, and then I'm going to conclude it with this. Actually, before I start my conclusion, you'll notice this little section in red here. Why do you think that's in red? Any idea why that's in red? Anyone have any idea why it's in red? Anyone raising their hands out there in Zoom land? Why that's in red? Anyone? I can't hear anybody. Oh, you in the back? No. Why is that in red? That's in red because you definitely should not do that. Do not ever put in conclusion for your final paragraph. Don't ever put in conclusion for your final paragraph. The reason is, frankly, right, if you're writing, right, I mean, if you see, if my essay looks like this, or even if it's like 4 or 5 paragraphs, just by looking at it, you can tell it's the last paragraph. You can tell it's my conclusion paragraph. So since it's obviously my conclusion, I don't need to tell the whole world in conclusion. It's obvious, right? It's obvious that it's my conclusion. So don't ever put things like in conclusion. It's like, we know that. We know that. So that's kind of considered wordiness, right? I mean, I wouldn't put in my introduction, like, my introduction says that. So just don't put that in there. So right, just like everything, straight to the point. Cell phones are detrimental to elementary school students. Study after study has shown that cell phone usage has caused such negative consequences to elementary school students, such as depression, suicidal ideation, social isolation, bullying, and so much more. Very few feminists are having that piece of technology. It's about time that schools move to eliminate them, whatever. Right? So you can kind of see your society would never stand for this type of activities. Cell phones need to be eliminated. Right? So you kind of see that I've wrapped up my story, or the student has, whoever wrote this, has wrapped up my issue on cell phones. Wrapped it up. There's no doubt to where this person feels on this issue, right? No ambiguity anywhere, right? I'm not left reading, wow, so how does this guy really feel about cell phones? Should they be banned in high school? Should they be banned in third grade? Right? You definitely know. No loose ends there, no questions, no, what I really don't get where he stands here, right? So you get the idea. So that's kind of how you should look at your conclusions. By the way, this kind of reminds me, I mentioned the whole in conclusion thing and don't write in conclusion. Always being concise And keeping to the point is so important in writing, right? You always want to be concise and straight to the point. I noticed on some thesis statements that was kind of happening too. So notice how the thesis statement is like right to the point. Cell phones have a devastating effect on elementary school students, and they must be banned in all schools. Always try to avoid, I notice some people's essays would say things like this. That they would say something like, I am going to tell you about cell phones have a devastating effect. Or I've seen things that say something like, this essay is going to inform you about cell phones having a devastating effect. You know what I'm talking about? Not this is essay. Geez, I can't. If you haven't noticed, I cannot write, type, and talk at the same time. This essay is going to inform you about cell phones. You don't need to say that. Again, it's wordiness. We know that this essay is going to inform you about. We know that you are going to talk to us about cell phones and all that kind of stuff. So always just stick to the point. Just direct, clear, concise statements. Cell phones have a devastating effect on elementary school students, and they must be banned. Similar down here with the conclusion. You don't need to say in conclusion. We know it's your conclusion. So just say cell phones are detrimental to elementary school students. Let me see how much clearer that sounds. No wordiness, no blah, 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 blah. Just like right to the point. So just, try to remember that with all of your writing, with everything you say, no kind of loosey-goosey words or any of that kind of stuff. Okay, so I hope that makes sense with your conclusion and even kind of indirectly with your thesis. Straight to the point, wrap it up, make it good, make it clear, make it concise. All right, friends, hope this helps. Can't wait to see your drafts, and we will talk again soon. Take care. Peace.